significance of the topic and demonstrates how the theme plays a central part. So this is what I always used to ask kids when we were doing their thesis check and we were really working on it, is I would say, is your topic clear? Do I know what the theme is? And can I tell the impact from this sentence? And if they could not answer those three things with an affirmative, then we were back to working on our thesis. So the thesis statement is central and it really holds everything together. So this got cut off. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know why it got cut off, but it's the glue. It's the glue that keeps your whole project together. I really think, so I for a really long time, you guys, I'm gonna be real honest with you, gonna have a moment with you. I, as a social studies teacher, was like, thesis is not my job. It's not my thing. I was all about like claims and making claims. And I was like, that's the English teacher's job to teach it. I was blinded by my social studies lens. And then what I realized was that I was doing a disservice to my students when I was doing History Day, because they really, really, really needed this central piece to hold everything together. The other thing I really noticed kids tended to do was not make it an argument, and they just spewed a bunch of facts. It was like history vomit in their first paragraph. And they were like, that's my thesis statement. I was like, not really, but that was where I really learned that they were struggling with this idea of a thesis statement. So again, going back to the previous slide, it's your topic plus your theme and your impact, right? So if you can't answer in the affirmative that those three things are there, then it's not your thesis statement. It's just an introductory paragraph. Does that make sense? So as far as just like some nitty gritty about thesis statements, there are no hard and fast rules as far as like that they should all start with a quote or that they should have a certain number of words. I do think they should include the theme words in some way. This year, if you don't use the word communication, key, or understanding, at least two of the three, I think it's going to be really hard to know the theme. I also think they should be fairly short. Most of our projects in History Day have a word limit, and we're going to get into that with student voice. This is a perfect opportunity to share student voice, right? So it doesn't have to be a quote. You're not citing anything. The students are showing their understanding of this topic. And so in, say, 40 to 60 words, they're giving their voice at the very beginning. And in the new rubric, which Wendy's going to go over in just a little bit, I mean, it's everything, you know. This is their opportunity to really show their own understanding. So I personally try to keep them pretty tight in the 40 to 60 category at the most, simply because it's a huge waste of words if we do too much.
This is what I want.
I'm on a call. Thanks. See, we're all in the same boat, everybody. And so this visual used to really help my students see how the thesis was that central piece, right? So it is what pulls in the background. It tells us, it centers the heart of the story, and it shows the impact. A lot of my students really, the 5 W's really helped them too. So I broke down all of this. And again, you guys are going to have a copy of this PowerPoint, so you're more than welcome to use this. But sometimes this really helped them to break down some of the things that they needed. But again, it's not all about the facts. So they shouldn't feel the need to answer every single one of these questions, but this may help them to get going on it. And that's it for thesis. Does anyone have any questions? I went through that really quick. I'm gonna stop share so that I can see you all. Does anyone have questions on the thesis? Yes.
I just have a question. It's sort of a general one, but knowing that, you know, as you go into the school year and you know what the theme is for NHD,
Yeah.
Do you find yourself when you're when you're teaching, do focusing or putting a little bit of time into the communications, or even
Yes.
giving them something that they sort of make those connections as they go?
Yeah. So a few years ago, it was leadership and legacy. And I found myself kind of, as the first semester went on, I would kind of alter my my lesson plans and kind of talk about the leadership of whoever it was that we were talking about, or the groups that we were talking about, and the legacy that left behind. So in my 7th grade class, when we kind of went back to exploration, we talked a lot about the leadership of the different explorers and the types of legacies that left behind. And I think that laid the groundwork. So if I was in a classroom this year, I definitely would be, if I was doing the explorers again, I would probably look at how they communicated with the natives. How did they communicate with back home? And how did that lead to an understanding? I mean, that, oh my gosh, that's huge, right? Columbus and the natives, like, whew, that's a huge one, right? There was no understanding. There was no key to understanding in that situation, right? So yeah, if there is an opportunity to bring it up and show them how the theme works, I would definitely do that.
I didn't think of like having taught geography for a few years, the communication of ideas, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, communication is one of the themes of geography. So
yeah,
I think this is actually the one year that we can really get geography teachers like on board with us. So hopefully, you know, if you have a geography teacher in your school and they can help you. I know in certain counties, like geography is an actual class. So,
yeah.
but yeah, every chance I would get, but I've always been that kind of teacher that I change things up a little bit anyway. Like I just can't teach it exactly the same every year, because you have a different group of kids, you have a different, you know, so this was a fun way for me to change it up a little bit too.
Did you have like a landing spot for these things? Like, did they have a part of their notes, or did you have a worksheet? Do you think that's necessary? Or something like just like minimal, or do you think?
So I've tried a few different things. I've tried interactive notebooks. That was probably my most successful in-person experience. Was I would have them make a notation every time that would come up in their interactive notebook. So like if we were talking about something specific and I brought up the History Day theme, I would have them make a special notation in their book so that when they went back to look for topics, if they were someone who didn't have an idea to begin with, it was really easy for them to go, oh yeah, we talked about that and it was kind of interesting. Maybe I want to look into that. And that was good for like 7th graders with zero background knowledge, that they would find things that we'd already talked about. As far as digitally, I'm guessing what you could do if you're using, say, Google, you could probably have them create a Google Doc, and it would be similar to an interactive notebook, right? That it would be one document that they would access, and you could say, okay, you know, while we're doing this assignment, add this topic in or add this idea in. Or after the class was over, you could always send it out to them as far as digitally, and then have them add it. And then that becomes like a log of all of the things you've talked about, so that especially your kids with less background knowledge, or your ELL or your special ed or your below level readers, they kind of have a jumping off point when it comes to working on topic selection or a thesis statement or really anything, because they already have some of your language to give them a head start. That's probably how I would do it digitally, just thinking off the top of my head.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Easier too. Thanks.
Yeah.
Laura, I've had teachers who made like a topic tree in their classroom, where they had like a bulletin board, and as they came across topics in their content, they would add leaves to their tree. You could do that digitally, creating a Padlet, which is, if you're not familiar with Padlet, you're kind of like creating your own Pinterest board. You could put topics in there as well. If if you're looking for ideas. But this is kind of fun. This is kind of a fun.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
Those are all good. That'll help, I think, with me too, to kind of make those connections. So I'm not all of a sudden like, hey guys.
Yeah.
Surprise!
Yeah.
Just to kind of
No, I definitely would talk about it throughout. And I think, last week, obviously we went on like a Shag rampage with you all and you all, like 7 million things we love about Shag. But as we were walking through all those introductory lessons from Shag, I would often say, now, if you were to be questioning something, these are the kinds of things you need to keep in mind. And so I kind of like subtly would say to them, like, hey, you're going to be doing this on your own at some point in this school year, right? So I would always give them that heads up that we're going to do a research project because it's social studies and that's what we do. And they're awesome. But it got to the point where my kids knew what History Day was, especially because I had my 7th and 8th graders, every year. And I was in my middle school, I had both grade levels. So my 8th graders would tell my 7th graders at the beginning of the year, like they let them know that History Day was huge in my class. And, that became a big thing. I think a topic tree virtually could be possible. You could use Flipgrid or Padlet, and you could link it in your Google Classroom. And every time something comes up, you could easily say to a student, hey, this week it's your job. Whenever a topic comes up, can you add it to the Padlet or add it to the Flipgrid? And then that kind of becomes like a weekly job for somebody else because you're navigating like sharing your screen and checking the chat box. Like you can't do that too. So you could definitely have that be a class assignment. And then by the end of, say, even a semester, can you imagine they would be like, oh, we did talk about a lot of stuff. You know how they all go home and say they did nothing in school today? Yeah. Then you would have evidence that, yes, we did a lot.
We're big into the arts integration projects in the spring. I wish I had known about all this in advance because that's always our challenge is we're now asking, oh, remember all that stuff we taught? You need to write it down and remember it. And now you need to come up with, so front loading all of this and having a landing pad makes so much sense. So this is going to help my school, to be quite honest. So thank you.
Yeah. So I would say Padlet's probably your best bet for that, just because you can add like images. So kids could easily add the art piece to it. The Flipgrid is really mostly videos. So I wouldn't necessarily think that would work. Yes. Can you see that? She sent a little bit. You can go over there and look. Go check. All right, I will mute myself now that my family is chatting. All right, Jenna, it's you.
Okay, so now that you have your thesis, we're going to talk about analysis and argument and how you can prove your thesis. So for me, I am the mom of Calvin, so I'm a big fan of Calvin and Hobbes. So sorry. Here we go. Okay, so what are the elements that you need to have in your historical argument? And I would argue that these elements are basically the elements you need to have in your National History Day project, because your project is really your argument produced, right, in a documentary or a performance or an exhibit. So you have your thesis and you introduce your thesis to your viewers. You're connecting to the theme in your thesis and throughout your argument. You have background information and context about the time period of your topic. You're telling what happened, who, what, when, where, why, and how. You have that those multiple perspectives and points of view to help have a well-rounded argument. And then you're including the historical significance of your topic. So what? Why does it matter? You're answering that question by showing the short-term and long-term impacts that change over time of your topic. And then you finish with a conclusion to sum up your argument. So let's get into how exactly to do that. So when I think of making an argument, I really think of almost like Legos or building blocks where you're building something according to instructions, and there's a very set way to go about doing it, and make sure that you have all the pieces. So when you have your thesis, within your thesis, you have or should have 4 to 6 claims that you are making. Each of those claims is similar to a topic sentence in a paragraph, right? It's kind of a summary of the claim or the piece of the argument that you're going to make, and it introduces each segment of your argument. Then you add evidence, 2 to 3 pieces of evidence per claim, and you can use primary sources as the evidence. You can use secondary sources like graphs, statistics, maps, etc. Avoid the overuse of secondary source quotes as evidence to your claims, because that's someone else's ideas, analysis, thoughts on the topic rather than actual like evidence to support your claim. And then finally, you use analysis to tie together the evidence and the claim. So why does it matter that this evidence happened? You're kind of making that connection between this claim matters because of this evidence. The analysis is really the point that you're making. So it's fine to talk about all of this in like, a bubble, here's what you should do, but let's look at it in practice in a student project. Last year in Idaho, I had a really fun project about menstruation and the stigma against discussion of the menstrual stigma. So I use this project as an example because the student did a really good job of making an argument. So you can see in her thesis, she's saying that in the 20th century, women of the world fought against the menstrual stigma and broke those barriers. That was the theme last year, breaking the barriers. And she says using education, art, and literature to change conversations about menstruation from hushed comments to bold discussion. So I've highlighted 3 claims within her thesis. One claim is that there was a stigma. Another is that women used education, art, and literature. And I guess that's really 3 claims, but for our purposes today, I made that into one. And then she's arguing that it changed the conversation or created conversation about menstruation. So how did she prove her claims? So first, she summarizes the first claim. Since the beginning of time, women have gone through menstruation. A discomfort with this topic began early. How is she going to prove that claim? She quoted sections of the Quran that talk about taboos about women who are bleeding and women who are expecting children. She had an excerpt from the first Latin dictionary refusing to talk about or to define menstruation, and a journal article from a social anthropologist. So she's building proof with these primary and secondary sources that directly relate to her claim. And then she ties it together with analysis. There was a long-held stigma that kept society from discussing menstruation. As I just demonstrated with my evidence, this barrier prevented women from understanding menstruation. So the analysis is connecting them together. Her next claim was it wasn't until the 1940s that women fought back with education. And then she talks about artists like Judy Chicago. And then she talks about literature. Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume. And to prove it, she has these really great primary sources that illustrate what she's talking about. A menstrual education pamphlet, artwork from different artists, and then this image of the cover of the book and quotes from the book. And then to connect it, she has her analysis where she ties together women did this, publishing pamphlets, creating provocative art, writing literature to break down this taboo. So are you seeing like the pattern that's emerging as she's talking about, as she's making her argument and proving it step by step? I guess I'm using my hands a lot. Sorry. I feel like I'm flapping my wings.
So just to make sure I understand So within the thesis statement, sorry, I still have crying in the background. Within the thesis statement, you have the claims, and then within the project is where you're giving
Yes.
to support the claims. But the claims are within the thesis statement.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Those are your arguments essentially. So yeah. So
Okay.
you're stating those items, and then you're going to prove them to be true throughout your project.
Perfect.
That's really what a national history project is. You know, we're not looking for a report for this project like the menstrual taboo. We don't want to report on that. We want an arguable statement, and you're making the argument into your project. Your project is your argument. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. I know this is tricky, and I'll be totally honest. Probably 75 to 85% of the projects that I see every year at our affiliate contest are reports, because that is another level, another depth of knowledge for students to take what they've learned and what they've gathered from their research from a report to an argument. And so we're really hoping with training like this with teachers, we can help you help your kids get to that next level where they're proving an argument, and they're taking their own thoughts about what they've researched and proving with it their ideas that they've had. Capiche?
Hey, Joanna,
Okay.
there's
Yes.
a question in the chat.
Yes.
Mackenzie
Sorry.
saying, how many claims do they need again?
4 to 6. We recommend 4 to 6 claims per project. I think everyone's probably familiar with the 5-paragraph essay, right? Where you have 3 claims. We're extending it just a little bit more because in your argument, you are connecting to the theme as well as explaining that significance in history. So that's already 2 of your claims taken with those jobs. So that's why we would say 4 to 6. Sound good? Okay. I can only see 2 faces at a time, so it's looking happy from where I am. Okay, so I think we've probably got the pattern here. Make the claim, prove it with actual primary and secondary sources, and then use your analysis to connect those together. Now I'm going to kick it over to Wendy to talk about that key role that significance plays in an NHD argument.
I have one more question. Sorry, before we
Dive right in.
when you're presenting, like when we're having the students write the thesis statement, do you have some sort of graphic organizer where they choose where they have their claims, and then where they have a place to
Yes.
I mean, I guess the research part of it is kind of at a different time, depending on how you do it, but do you have?
So we have in the class information in Canvas, we have some thesis guides to help you write your thesis. And then we also have, I don't know if you can see this argumentation plan. And we have it in a fillable format, and then an example of the argumentation plan filled out. And this lays out for students their thesis, their argument, their claim, their evidence, and their analysis. So it kind of walks them through this process.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm the mother of 3 boys, and we're big into Lego. So I love using Legos to kind of show things, and I use Lego blocks to show my students, here's your evidence, here's your claims, here's your analysis, to kind of build on top of each other and show how they all build together. Mackenzie says it'd be great to have a graphic organizer. You're totally welcome. We have those for you, so check those out in the class.
I was going to say, everything's on Canvas, so if you check it out, it's under this session. And Laura, I love your acronym, capture the audience, assert your position, and preview what you're going to say. I love that. That is exactly what they're doing. Yeah, that's perfect.
Had students in my first CLA class, and I found that was really helpful. It just kind of helped them focus and stuff. It's overwhelming, especially this getting started part.
Yeah, and for a lot of students, this is the very first time they're doing anything like this, right? Their first time doing this kind of research, their first time making an argument. So what we want to see in National History Day is growth from where they started. So as long as they're achieving from where they started, yay, National History Day is working for them, and you're doing a great job, because for a lot of you, you're middle school teachers, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, and this is their first time doing it, and so this is where they're really learning. And I love seeing kids when they come back for like their second year of National History Day, because they're like, oh my gosh, I get it all. You know, they totally, everything crystallizes for them, and you're laying those foundations. So great work.
And I was going to say, you know, going back to what Laura had asked earlier, as far as like kind of presenting the theme and these ideas throughout your teaching, I also used to do the very similar thing. So I would give them these prompts when we would every time we would do like a document analysis or a DBQ, anything like that, I would always give them really similar activities to do. So I was kind of laying that groundwork that then when they had to do it for their own documents and their own resources, then it wouldn't be as daunting, because we would have already made a claim using the evidence that I was giving them. So I would just really highly recommend using all of those kinds of ideas throughout the year to prep them for when you introduce this idea, because then they have their peers to help them create the claim on, say, a DBQ. But then when it comes time to do their own project, they're going to feel so much more confident in being able to do it on a topic that they choose.
Yeah, for sure. Build that scaffolding throughout the year of making claims, proving it with evidence, and writing an analysis to connect it together. Okay, so I'll turn things over to Wendy to talk about significance.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
This is like 2 weeks in a row with computer issues, so I am transferring all of that responsibility to somebody else next week. I am going to start by talking about significance in history, because that is an important component of every project that is easy for kids to leave out. But I want to emphasize to everybody that that is a required element, and the judges will be looking for it. We have a criteria on the evaluation sheet that says, how well did they cover significance in history? And I think it can be vague what that means, so we're going to talk about it in some detail. What it means is it's not enough to tell Jackie Robinson's story. We also need to tell why he mattered, like what changed because of him and his actions. What didn't change, right? So it's kind of like Paul Harvey telling the rest of the story. The significance in history really is the rest of the story. And the way to pin that down for kids is to use some really simple prompts, such as, this topic matters because, and have them think that through. Having them think about what changed and what didn't change, especially when they're talking about any kind of civil rights topics, is important, so that they are not just generalizing that, after Jackie Robinson, everything was totally fine, because it wasn't. Another way to really help pin this down is to have them think in very concrete terms about what the short-term outcomes were and the long-term outcomes. And it's important that they build their significance statements on evidence. What I see a lot is that kids will offer an opinion about why this is important. And that's where you get these grand sweeping statements that are not grounded in research or facts. It's kind of like they research up to the end of Jackie Robinson's life, and then they finish researching and they make some opinion statements about it. And that's not really what we're looking for. We are looking for them to base their significance statements on history or on evidence. Questions about that? Okay. All right, next slide. So I have, there's, I think, a fillable in Canvas for you that is along these same lines, but it's important to show what changed and what the impacts were. And this just reminds everyone that we can't just talk about what the outcome was, we need to provide some actual evidence. It's interesting how kids will fill in a whole lot of gaps kind of with their own presumptions about getting from then to now. And that really leads them totally away from the path that we're trying to build of basing the information you present on research and evidence. All right, Joanna. Okay, questions about significance before we move on? Laura has something.
Yeah, Laura was sharing that she heard the terms lasting impact and enduring issue as a way to talk about that, like long-term significance. And those are great terms, Laura. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I wish I had known them the first year. It was like year 4, I think, into social studies before I heard those, and I felt like such a like that's, if only, but whatever. Now I know.
We learn every year.
Do that.
Right.
You're great.
Yep. All right, so we're going to talk about student voice. This is a new criteria this year, but for those of you who are new, it's all new to you. So this text that you see on the screen is the actual description of student voice from our new rule book. And what I've done, I'm not going to read it to you because you can read, but you'll see what I'm emphasizing with the bold and with the caps. Your ideas, your argument, your analysis, your project, not somebody else's project, right? This is about encouraging students to speak and to make their own thoughts, ideas, analysis clear in their project. All right, go ahead, Joanna. Let's go to the next one. So this one slide that moves everything off the edge is funny.
I know.
Okay. I cannot remember what that says. I think it has something to do with, we don't really care what your opinion is, right? You need to support what you're saying with evidence from your research. So here are some things that student voice is. We are reframing the learning target. We want to shift kids' focus from just presenting all of this stuff that they found in their research to making their own thoughts clear in the project itself. We are telling them that we are valuing their research, the research that they did, the thinking that they did, the conclusions that they drew. And we designed this, our goal is to really be an incentive, a positive incentive, so that we can reward students for clearly showing their voice in the project itself. Here are some things that student voice is not. It's not another word count. Those of you who have done History Day before know that word counting is a big deal in exhibit and website categories. And we felt that that was not the right way to go to reach this goal. And so we didn't go that way. We went this way. Student voice is not meant to be a rejection of secondary source research. Not at all. And it's not an incentive to show off their experts and just to plaster big quotes from their research all over their project. It's not permission for them to write their project in the first person. And I will say the exception to that is the process paper, which they should write in first person, but the project still needs to be written in third person. And it's not permission for students to just give opinion statements to say, I think, I feel, this is what I believe. It's research-based. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, hey, can somebody put that link in the chat? Because I have a great example.
Hi, Christine, can you do that?
I can't do it either.
Sorry, child coming in. Yes, I'm
Okay.
going to do that right now.
So here's a website from this last year, Breaking Barriers theme. That is a great example of what we're trying to move students away from. So as soon as Christine gets that link in the chat, I'd invite you all to open up that website and just start taking a look around. Now, this is also a way we're going to introduce you to the website category and give you a sense of what they look like. This project was built with the NHD Web Central Builder. So you can see on the title page or on the home page, it's basic information, and that includes the category, the age division, and then these word counts that I was mentioning. So as you're looking through, keep in mind, this is a senior division group project. Clearly, it's aesthetically very well done. The artistic quality is really, really great. Clearly, they did a lot of research on this topic, right? As you kind of scan through the different pages in this website, you'll see how much effort they put into this. But there is a problem. Okay, Joanna, you want to move me to the next one? And their problem is with secondary source quotes. The NHD rules for word counts for websites is students are allowed to have 1,200 student composed words or less. And this includes their narrative, the title of the project, any headings that are in the text, and any interpretive captions that they use to interpret images or even other documents and whatnot that they put in the website. So that student composed word count does not include quotes that they put in the project. It doesn't include the source credits that identify where they got their images. And it doesn't include repeating tabs that appear in their navigation bar. So to compare to our word count for the paper category, kids who write a historical paper for History Day have a maximum of 2,500 total words. Now, the word counts for this project that you're looking at, the kids reported 1,199 student composed words. I went through this website and did a detailed word count. Took me about an hour to do it. And I counted just over 1,200 student composed words. So they know how to count student composed words very well. They're very close on that. However, look at how many secondary source quotes they had. Over 5,000 of their words were secondary source quotes. So if you include the small number of words that were primary source quotes, a large number of words that were secondary source quotes, I mean, they quoted experts and scholars for more than a total paper could be in length, if you see that math. And their total word count, including their source credits, which don't really count as readable text, but there are over 7,000 words in this one project. And if you look, all of the captions they have under their images, they use secondary source quotes to caption everything so that they didn't have to use up their own student composed words. So this is a perfect example of how we're trying to read what we're trying to do with student voice, which is to direct them away from this tendency to just throw experts onto their project and not speak with their own voice and give us their analysis. Does anybody have comments or questions about that as you're looking through the website?
I just see that every day. Like I see students even in document, where they're doing DBQ, they just want to almost copy paste a quote and they stick it in there, but there's no commentary. So yeah. This makes total sense. And I can see how this would happen because I see it often. So good to know.
I think part of it is coming from doing internet research where it is so much easier to just block and copy blocks of text. I'm old enough to remember having to actually write things down on a piece of paper. And so that really mitigated a lot against this happening. But, you know, we aren't going to change the internet. And so we're trying to create a positive incentive through student voice for them to think about this differently.
Hey, Wendy, Nicole has a question. She was wondering how NHD determined the word count limits for each project format.
That is a great question, and I do not know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm guessing it was an estimate of, you know, how many words were needed to make your argument, right? And I'm intrigued, Nicole. We'll dig into this, and next week we'll have an answer for you.
I think one thing that sort of shook me when Wendy presented this to all the coordinators, was it last week or the week before? Maybe multiple weeks ago, I don't remember. But I think what really struck me is that the website category is really unique in that in the paper category, those even the quotes are going to count, right? And I remember really struggling this last year with a couple of our paper submissions going to nationals, really trying to get them in that 1,200 word, you know, student composed and all, you know, or it's 2,000, I think, for papers. 2,500. Goodness, what is wrong with me today? Anyway, what I'm trying to say is I think this is one of those glaring moments where we realize that not only do we all need to be explaining this to students better, this is exactly why this student voice rule or piece came about, because it was getting out of control. The students were really using the quotes as kind of their hitch, right? So I love this. This is like the most telling piece, a slide of the whole night. And this is what we really, you know, need kids to focus on, is that we want to hear from them, but not in the I think this, right? My opinion is this. We want them to show their passion in these projects. So I appreciate, Wendy, you taking as much time as you did to count all these words.
I love the way you said that, Christine. We're like using that idea of show us what you're passionate about in this topic. I think that is probably something that will make sense to them. I'm not sure how motivated they're going to be about, you know, word counts. But one thing to think about is you look at the different categories, you know, and we'll look at an exhibit here. The exhibit word limit for student composed words is really tight. They only get 500 student composed words on an exhibit. And I can tell you, because I've talked to teachers and parents who say, well, we have to put a lot of quotes on so we can get around the word limit. That is not the idea. So that's a lot of the thinking that we're trying to kind of shift, is that an exhibit has a limited word count because it's supposed to be like a museum exhibit, and you don't go to a museum and just read. The visuals are supposed to help tell the story. So there are reasons that the word count is so small on an exhibit. I think with websites, you know, as I said, we opted not, and I was part of the committee that worked on the rulebook revisions. We opted against putting a cap on website word limits, even though it's very easy for that category to be kind of unlimited. And so in this way, judges can communicate to kids, wow, your voice was not there. All I'm reading is secondary source quotes. So here's an example of an exhibit that did it well. And this is also from this year. If you look, this exhibit is about epidemiology, and that big image in the center panel is an incidence map of disease over a city grid, okay? And so that's a primary source. And then if you look at the words in the pink box, those are the student composed words where the students are making their case. They are showing you their analysis and their thinking. And then in the blue box, this is where they are using a quote that kind of illustrates their point, but the quote doesn't overwhelm what they're saying, right? It's evidence for what they're saying. Does that seem to make sense to everyone? Keep in mind, I only have a one-person box on my screen, so you need to shout out if you have a question.
Yeah, that looks great, Wendy. You can see they make their claim, they have their primary source quote as evidence, and then their analysis is above the quote as well.
Yeah.
Making the case, using as few words as possible. Yay, yay.
Yeah, don't you love how they use that incidence map? It's really it conveys a lot of the information for their topic, for their presentation. So that's what we really want to see. It's not just like, okay, here's a picture of this person and here's a picture of this person. It really is about using those visuals as part of the analysis, if you can get them there. Okay. All right, we wanted to talk just a little bit more about the website category because that's our featured category tonight. And I want to make sure everybody understands that students must use NHD Web Central as their builder. And if you used it last year and your students were frustrated, never fear. Our web designer has been working really since last spring to implement improvements based on the feedback they were getting. Last year was the first year that it was used. It was built really from the ground up specifically to serve NHD and to keep students safe on the internet. It's a closed system. People cannot search the websites. So it was important to do that, but we knew it would be a real building process as they kind of added refinements as we went along. So we thank you for your patience, but be sure to check out the help library at Web Central. The materials are new, improved. The builder itself is much more streamlined. The user interfaces are a lot better this year. And they have made it possible for kids to use the builder on tablets. So if tablets are what your kids have access to through the school, they can build on Web Central using that device. Any questions about that before we go on? Nope.
Okay, yay for website. Yay for website. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about any of the things we covered today? We tried to keep it to an hour. We zipped through thesis statements, arguments, student voice. We're here to answer questions if you have anything. If you're all set, you're free to hop off, but we'll hang around for a while to answer questions.
I did forget to share the video just really quickly, or just mention it. So there is a video on Canvas, and it says, I think National History Day, what's your point? And it's a great way to kind of show kids like the whole idea behind making a point, getting to that argumentation place. It's from History Day in Minnesota. It's a little bit older, but it's funny. It's a game show. When you first click on it in Canvas, it's going to tell you it's not available. Just have it open in a new window or a new tab and it will work. But that really helped my students. And of course, then they got engaged in it because it's like a little bit older and a little dated, and they all wanted to make fun of the outfits and that kind of stuff, which is great. So I highly suggest showing kids that when they're struggling to get to their point, when they're really still wordy and you're struggling to get them to that point. I think it's a great sort of medium for them to understand it. I mean, they are the YouTube generation, right? Nicole's question about checking word count. I'll let Wendy answer that one.
So if it were me, what I would be doing is having website and exhibit kids writing all of their text in a Word doc before they start building their actual project, because it's really easy to count words in a Word doc. And you can have you could do, one Word doc for student composed words and one Word doc for quotes, where you could count them separately. that is what I would do. And I realize that they're going to start building and they're still going to make changes to their text, but at least it would give them a baseline. That's my best suggestion. Does anybody else have a trick?
I like to have kids also build in PowerPoint or Google Slides because you can do word counts there, and it's nicer to print maybe the words from Google Slide or PowerPoint.
That's true. And to adjust fonts and sizes and make it look like something that you would put on an exhibit board. I think that's a good idea too.
Yeah.
Great question. Yeah, it is a great question. And I am a real advocate for don't let them start building too early. They're going to want to, but it will end up taking longer because they'll be developing content as they build. And then they're going to have to do all kinds of reworking. So that is not the best way, but you have to have a lot of forbearance to really get that text ironed out and have it gone through a revision process at least one time before they start to put it into their website. But it's really, I think, more efficient in the long run if you can do that.
I actually have a teacher here in Idaho who got so fed up with that she now requires all of her kids to write a paper for her grade. And then if they want to turn it into a website or an exhibit, they're welcome to, but she wants the writing. She wants to assess their argumentative writing. So it doesn't make you popular with your kids, I can tell you, but that's an idea.
And I will make one other point while we're talking about bringing that material, the written material from the working document into the final project. When you have kids who, if you have kids who decide to build a physical exhibit this year, I highly recommend that they do not glue anything onto that board. Velcro is better. Something that they can take off, reprint, and put back up, or move things all around. But glue is so permanent and so hard to modify that is honestly my last choice.
Sticky tack.
Sticky tack, yeah. Or and the like the contact strip kind of sticks. Yeah, things like that. We've used like little round Velcros. Oh.
Ooh.
Scott makes repositionable tape.
No.
Oh my word. Okay, I'm going to be looking for that. Thank you, Heidi. Awesome. Any other questions? We'll just hang out. Feel free to unmute, shout out anything. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you, everybody.
Go hop onto the debate. It's not over, I'm sure.
Thanks,
I'm
Mackenzie.
glad it's extremely helpful.
Thank you.
I actually had a comment that I couldn't get my speaker to work, but I think going back to student voice, this is the first time a lot of students have been told they actually have a voice. And that a lot of the times they've run into teachers where history to them is just regurgitation.
You know, that's such a good point, Heidi. I hadn't thought of it quite that way. We're also empowering students, right, to trust in their own thinking and that it matters what they think.
Yeah.
So that's a really great point.
It takes them a while to trust themselves, though, I think, if they've had so many teachers who tell them, no, that's the wrong answer because this is what the experts say. And
well, I think, go ahead, finish.
Oh, no.
I think that's going to tap into, I just lost my train of thought, but sort of that impulse on the part of people who kind of know the canon, you know, in history and have done all of this reading and kind of having an expectation that kids have to come up with something that's totally new and has never been said before. And that's really not what we're saying either.
Yeah.
Heidi, I really like using Smithsonian Magazine and National Geographic's History Magazine as like a good resource for students, because they are, they're writing now about historical topics. Sometimes they have new evidence, sometimes they don't, but they kind of come out and say like, this is a different interpretation, than maybe you've heard before, of George Washington's role in the French and Indian War or whatever. And it helps students, I think, to see that history is a living, breathing discipline, and that people are constantly reevaluating how we look at the same pieces of evidence, and they are being real historians by doing that.
I love that, Joanna.
Thanks for making that point, Heidi. Dang,
Sorry,
we should have started with that.
I couldn't get my for some reason couldn't get my voice to work. So
No problem. Thanks so much.
All right. We have a couple more people on. Are there questions?
Thanks, Carly.
Thank you, Carly.
All right, that's it.
Yes.
I'm going to stop the recording.